All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. I'm here with a first-time guest on the show, but I think one of the cool things that I talk about a lot on this podcast over the time I've been doing it is that Winnipeg's music scene seems to be very incestuous, is sort of the word that I've been using to describe it. And everyone's playing on each other's albums in each other's bands and at each other's shows. And I feel like the guest on this episode, when I was looking at the credits on your most recent release, the amount of like people that not only have I talked to before in this podcast, but who are just very notable figures, especially in the local jazz scene. Um, it's great to see that. I love seeing that all of these great artists are working together and playing on each other's projects, and it's just very kind of illustrative, I think, of sort of how Winnipeg works and how everyone is sort of helping each other out and participating in each other's artistic pursuits. So we can get into that for sure, but I think the best way to start this off is if you want to introduce yourself and give a bit of background about what it is you do as an artist.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for having me on the show. So my name's Connor Derraugh. I guess I'm a graduate from the jazz studies program at the University of Manitoba. I graduated with kind of a double major in jazz saxophone and piano. So obviously those are my two main instruments of choice. Um, and yeah, so that's kind of a little bit about me. I guess I can speak on this.
Sure.
So when I was 15 years old, I actually just turned 28 on Tuesday. Right after I turned 15, I went into the hospital for a routine day surgery to repair a deviated septum in my nose.
Yeah.
And and during the surgery, there was a complication, and the surgeon accidentally bumped two orbital bones into my brain, causing a traumatic brain hemorrhage. So I was supposed to go home that night, and it was a day surgery.
Yeah.
Instead, I ended up being hospitalized for a month. I was in a coma for the first week, and the whole right side of my body was paralyzed. So when I came home from the hospital a month later, well, first of all, when I was in the hospital, I had to relearn how to walk, how
Oh,
to handwrite, how to tie my shoes, like all these basic things you don't even remember learning. And when I came home, I saw the piano, and I thought, oh, great, something I can play that and do to take my mind off what happened. And when I put my hands on the piano, my right hand was so weak, I couldn't even press down a key.
wow.
It just sat there, and I was just devastated because at that point, I already thought, like, I'm going to be a piano player for the rest of my life. And, I'd be a, touring musician, what have you. And I was just devastated because I couldn't even play with half my
Yeah,
hands.
that's huge. You need both hands for a piano. It's not like you can kind of make do with just one, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So I was sitting there devastated, and my dad says, "You have a left hand, just make it work." So I just played piano with my left hand for several months until um, my right hand finally gained back the strength. But then I had to, in high school, I had to work probably 10 times as hard or 10 times harder than anybody else my age just to catch up and just to get back to where I was. So I think that makes me fairly unique as a piano player because I can say that 99.5% of piano players, their right hand is the dominant hand.
Sure. Yeah.
Because even in like classical piano, it's like, or in jazz piano, it's like you comp chords with your left hand, then you're soloing with your right. So your right hand's moving a lot more. But for me, when I was in high school, especially grade 10, I comped a bit with both hands. And then when it was my turn to solo, I dropped my right hand and solo with my left hand.
Oh wow.
And it's just because I couldn't keep up with my right hand. So I just soloed with my left hand, and eventually my right hand started to gain some movement, and eventually I was able to solo a bit in grade 11. But yeah, it was extremely tough, but I'm incredibly grateful for it as well.
Yeah. Well, I saw something about that on your bio. Actually, I was looking at your website today, and the thing that I thought about when I was reading that and hearing it from you now as well is has that whole experience has that impacted the way you play now? Like, are there certain things you do on the piano that maybe because of what you went through and because of having to compensate for with the one hand there? I mean, has that affected your playing in any kind of interesting ways now? Like, do you still see aspects of that seeping into what you're doing?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Like it's like for example on the album there's a song that comes to mind. It's called Lockdown.
Okay.
I'm sure you can guess when I wrote that. And and it's funny because like it's a pretty like funky groovy song, and like it sounds really groovy when I'm playing with both hands. But if I take away the left hand and just play the right hand, it just sounds like a super basic song.
Okay.
But all the funk and groove comes from the left hand and moving it all around, and my right hand's really just like playing some chord shots, you know. But it's you know, so like even when I write songs, like, you know, sometimes like not all my songs, but like a fair amount of them is just like, you know, I come up with a lot of like funky bass lines or just bass lines in general or just like left hand things because I it's just a strength of mine, right? That most piano players don't have, you know.
Yeah.
Like even when I talk to a lot of piano players and they say, "Oh man, I need to work on my left hand," and I'm like, "Well, you know, you could have a brain injury and then be forced to, you know." Obviously, I'm joking,
Yeah.
but you know, but the main thing is like on piano, especially like I even did this online video. It was like online video lesson series that Jeffrey Keyser put out, who's a jazz piano player. And at one point, he says, you know, piano players ask me, "How do you develop a fast left hand?" And he said, "It's easy. Just everything you do with your right hand, do with your left."
Hmm.
But I think it's a lot of time like piano players just don't do that because they just don't have the time or just don't have the patience for it. But I didn't really have the option. That was like that was just forced upon me, and I was like, okay, let's, you know, even like shortly after my brain injury, my dad got me this Dave Matthews Band music book,
Okay.
and I was playing along with it and you know, playing the music out of it. And my dad, he can't read music, but he can see what's right hand and what's left hand. And he was listening to me play, and he comes and looks at my hands, looks at the music, looks at my hands, looks at the music, and he says, "You're not playing what's on the music, are you?" I said, "No, not exactly." And he says, "Well, how are you doing that?" I said, "Well, I'm just making up for what I can't do with my right hand and do it with my left and just making it work." He says, "Well, like you sound like the band, so keep up what you're doing." But I just like I just had to find, you know, find a way. And I think that's a really important thing for everyone. Like, you know, whether you have a disability or you're or not or anything you're going through, like music always finds a way to come out and, you know, speak. And I think that's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah. Well, and I guess in your case too, the other option would have been to quit, right? I mean, you had to either
Yeah,
find a way to compensate and way to make it work with the circumstances you were in, or quit. And obviously, that, you know, based on where you are now, that wasn't going to happen. That was not in the cards. So you were clearly motivated enough to keep going with music.
yeah, you know, and that's exactly right. You know, when my injury happened, my two options were either just quit and just let my life rot away,
Yeah.
and I wasn't going to do that, and definitely my parents weren't going to let me do that because I was only 15. Like I have a lot of life left to live, and at the same time, yeah. So that was one option, or the other option is, well, how can I become the best I can be despite my disability and situation?
Yeah.
And like even when I was in the hospital, like the first time I got help to walk, it took my dad and three physiotherapists, and they helped me walk halfway around my bed, and then I lied down and took a 4 hour nap.
Yeah.
Like that's how tired I was, right?
Sure.
But then the next day I walked to the door, the next day I walked to the desk, and then my, you know, the first like 3 weeks, 2.5 3 weeks in the hospital, I don't remember at all. It's a complete blank. But my dad said when I got home, he says, you know, like when we were in the hospital, you'd ask, "Oh, how long did we walk yesterday?" And he said, "Oh, yesterday we did 2 minutes." And he said that I would say, "Okay, well today we're doing three." Like
Right. Right.
I was just always, I was really stubborn, and I was just like, "I'm gonna get better. I'm gonna get better." And what's actually really interesting is like there's several stories of things I said that I just don't remember at all. But one thing that jumps out is, so my brain injury happened in the middle of May, and the U of M jazz camp always happens in like the second or third week of August.
Okay.
and I had gone like 3 years previous to the camp. I went ever since I was 12 years old, and I loved it. And so when I was in the hospital, at this point, I was walking for about a couple of minutes before I had to lay down and take a few-hour nap. And in the middle of one of my walks, I stopped and I looked at my dad and I said, I'm going to the U of M jazz camp this summer, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. And he says, okay, well, we'll see. But in his mind, he thought, there is no way.
Yeah.
Because like I could barely survive a couple minute walk. U of M jazz camp is like 6 straight 8-hour days, but I was stubborn and I went and I just played with one hand just to say I did it,
Yeah.
that was my goal, and I'm not gonna let that goal stop me. Like I'm going, and I think that really helped, just with everything. And there's even there's a song on my album, it's instrumental, called Look for the Positives.
Yeah.
And that song has several different meanings, but one of the meanings for me is, when you go through something, like really tough in life, like, so for me, it would be my brain injury, just I know it's easier said than done, but if you try and look for the positives or find the positives, like it's super helpful.
Yeah.
Especially when it's it's just really, I think it's really important to find those positives and just look at the positive side of life, because especially for me at 15, like my life could have very easily ended that day.
Totally. Yeah.
But it didn't. So for me, I've always just had thought now, like, I'm just grateful to be here. Like I'm just gonna be as positive as I can, because like, when you're like hanging out in the room with some of your close friends, and all of a sudden someone walks in the room with like a very just negative, crappy attitude.
Yep.
And the entire environment of the room changes.
Yeah, it sucks the air out of the room. Yeah.
Yeah. I never want to be that guy,
Yeah.
And I was once described by a friend in university as a ray of sunshine that never shuts up. So
right on. That's a good way to be, I think, after something like that too, to have that outlook. And I mean, so jump ahead, a number of years now. At the time we're recording this, you just released a record. I guess it was a few days ago. From the time we're recording this, so that's a lot of music in that time over that period, and becoming that guy, not wanting to be the guy sucking the air out of the room, and having that attitude and everything. How did this album, how long has this album been in the works for, first of all? Because we're in a time now when the pandemic is essentially over, people are playing shows, touring's happening, all of that stuff is back, but
right.
A lot of people have had sort of music they've been working on for years now that has been sort of waiting to be released. Is this something that fits into that category that's been being worked on for a while?
Yeah, definitely. So this, I guess I'll talk a bit about like how the project came about.
Sure.
And then get into that. So,
well, and this is a duo project too, right? I mean, this is you and a vocalist.
Correct. Yeah. So the album is it's Connor and Cordelia, and the title of the album is called Acceptance. And the album is for a mutual friend. It was my best friend and Cordelia's ex-boyfriend.
Okay.
They dated for 4 years, but they remained really good friends after the breakup. And on March 2nd, 2020, he very suddenly passed away.
Oh, wow.
He was 26 years old, and he had an undiagnosed heart condition. And in his sleep, the left side of his heart died, and that was it.
Wow.
So I remember waking up on March 3rd, and it was like 8 a.m. and I came downstairs, and my dad just got off the phone with his dad. His dad phoned, and my dad's, right when I walked downstairs, my dad says, Alan just phoned, Cole passed away yesterday. And I was just rocked, because he was not only like one of my best friends, but also he was my first friend post brain injury.
Okay.
Because I'd gone to Charleswood Junior High, and all my friends went to Oak Park in grade 10. But I made the decision before my brain injury to go to Vincent Massey, because it had by far the best band program in the city. And I thought, you know what, that's my best ticket into the U of M program, and that's where I want to go anyways. And so I ended up going to Massey, and I was in grade 10. Cole was in grade 12. He's 2 years older than me. And I walked into the band room the first day, and Cole walked up to me and he says, "Hey, I recognize you from the jazz camp. Welcome to Massey." And then later that day, the jazz band teacher pulled me to his office and he says, "I've decided to put you in the senior jazz band, like the grade 12 big band."
Cool.
And he said, like, for three reasons. One, the kids in grade 12 are more mature, they'll treat you with more respect. The grade 12 big band rehearses during period 5, while the other big bands rehearse after school. And he said, "I know by 3:30 you're going to be exhausted. You want to get home, get your rest. And thirdly, that's where you musically belong." So all of a sudden, I was playing piano. Cole was the drummer. So not only are we in the same band, but we're in the rhythm section together, and we just clicked, and we roomed together on band trips, and we just hit it off. So, fast forward March 2020, he passes away, and he went to Brandon University where he met Cordelia.
Okay.
And they dated for a couple of years there, and then they moved out to Vancouver together, dated for another couple of years, and then they eventually broke up, but they remained good friends. And then Cole moved back because he was having some health issues due to his diabetes that he's had since the age of 4. So when he passed away, a week later was the funeral, and Cordelia flew in for the funeral. I'd only met her maybe 3 times before he passed. And at the funeral, we ended up playing a duo song together. It was an Amy Winehouse song.
Okay.
And we played it just because Cole and Cordelia kind of started dating because of their mutual love of Amy Winehouse. And so we played together, and I was just, obviously we're all really emotional, but I also like kind of forgot about how incredible of a voice she had because I'd only met her a couple of times.
Right.
And we went for lunch the next day, and I said, "Hey, I've reached out to several vocalists in the city about writing lyrics to my songs because I have a lot of songs that lend themselves well to lyrics, but I'm a terrible lyricist and I'm also not a good singer. So even if I wrote lyrics, I wouldn't sing them anyway." So
yeah.
So I said, like, "Would you want to write some songs even though you're in Vancouver?" She says, "Yeah, absolutely. Send me something." So she got home and I sent her a song, and it was just a groove. And 5 days later, she sent back a recording of her singing on it, and it just blew me away.
Cool.
And I never even heard any of her compositions before, so it was really like, okay, I don't know how this is going to play out, but I just trust her. And so we ended up writing. She's on 8 songs on the album, but we ended up we wrote 7 together virtually during a pandemic. So we were never even in the same room once. And then in August 2021, her and her boyfriend moved from Vancouver to Montreal, and they drove. And so mid-drive, they stopped in Winnipeg for like 4 or 5 days, stayed at my house.
Right on.
She recorded, then they moved on to Montreal. And so the album, like, it really came about very organically. Like, nothing was forced, nothing was, it was just very, it was like very genuine, and yeah, so and I didn't even think of doing an album with her. I just thought, like, oh, let's write some music together. And after we wrote like maybe 2 or 3 songs, I thought, you know what, we should do an album and dedicate it to Cole.
Yeah.
And so that's what we've done. And so like the title of the album is called Acceptance, and even the title track, which is also called Acceptance, I wrote about maybe 2 or 3 months after he passed away, and my parents were out for a walk with the dog, and I was at home playing this. I came up with this song, and when my parents walked in the house, they were listening to it, and my dad quickly realized it was my song because he never heard it before. And so when I finished playing it, he says, "You know what's funny? I couldn't help but think about Cole when you were playing that." And I said, "Well, funny enough, that's who I was thinking about." And I called the song Acceptance because at that point I was past the grieving stage and had kind of accepted that he was no longer here. And so then I sent it out to Cordelia, and like all the songs that we wrote together, I just send the song and just like I just gave it a title, or even a couple I didn't give a title. I was just like, do what you want with it, And yeah, and everything she sent back, it just again just blew me away. And it was, I really feel that like the project is really bittersweet because obviously we still wish that Cole was here, but at the same time, if he hadn't passed away, this album would have never come about because
Right.
I would have never connected with Cordelia like the way I have. And I'm really proud to say like she's a really great friend and a collaborator and will be a lifelong friend.
That's probably the best possible result you can get out of a tragedy like that, right? Is making that connection and then putting out something like this into the world that has that inspiration from your friend who passed, and getting that kind of those feelings onto a record too, right? I mean, one thing that's interesting, I think you said too, is, I mean, well, first of all, with the title being Acceptance, and the music itself doesn't necessarily sound, to me anyway, like it doesn't sound like it's not a downer. You know what I mean? Like there's definitely
Right.
a lot of upbeat, a lot of positive kind of vibes to it, and that's got to, I imagine, be part of what you're talking about, where you sort of realize that he's not here, but you're paying tribute to him, and this is sort of your what you're putting out there when you're thinking about him.
Yeah, and what's funny too is Cordelia has always said like, yeah, Cole wouldn't want like a sappy album dedicated to him. Like he would hate that.
Right, right.
But so we put out an album, and yes, there is definitely some emotion on it, and some songs that are directly for him. But at the same time, there's also some upbeat songs. Obviously, you don't want a song with just like 11 heartbreaker ballads. So
Yeah,
you have to kind of, just do what, put a variety of music on there. And actually, so the day that I heard that he passed away, during the afternoon, I sat at the piano, and this is the only time I've written a song like this, but I played the song from start to finish in one take,
okay,
and it just poured out of me. And literally, my dad said tears were streaming down my face, but I had to get it out. And right after I finished playing it, I thought, well, that's for Cole. So a week later at his funeral, the funeral started by me playing that song that I'd written for him the day
oh
he
wow,
passed. And his dad's a singer songwriter. So, and actually 10 days before he passed away, Cole and I were in the studio for working on his dad's next project. So, after I played the song and after the funeral, his dad came up to me and he says, I couldn't help but hear words when you're playing your song. Do you mind if I write lyrics to it? And I said, absolutely. Like, yeah, take your time, and so it took him several months, but eventually he sent back lyrics. And so the last song of the album, which is called Far Too Soon, his dad's singing on it. And that's
cool.
the song that, the song I wrote the day he passed. So that song is very much directed to Cole, but the rest of the album, yeah, it's, there's some emotion, there's joy, laughter. Like even at the album release a few days ago, some people came up to me, they're like, oh, you had me laughing and then crying and then laughing and crying and happy and sad. And that's kind of what I was happy to hear that because it wasn't just one or the other. It was a mix of emotions, and
Yeah,
that was kind of what the night was like. So
I know, like you just said, you had the release show and everything. What is sort of the future of this? I mean, you're not in the same city, the two of you, right? So, doing this as an ongoing thing. I mean, of course, you can send music back and forth. The pandemic showed us that sort of pretty much
right,
everyone can do that now, right? But do you
yeah.
foresee like more records as a duo in the future? Like, do you think that connection you've built over the course of this, it has potential for more down the road?
Oh yeah, definitely. What's actually really cool is since Cordelia's in Vancouver, so she flew in for the album release and stayed at my house. And then the first 9 days of July, I'm flying out to Vancouver, staying at her place, and we're doing a few shows out there
Oh, right on.
for this album. We're doing like 2 duo shows in one night, and then we're also doing a full band show with musicians in Vancouver I've never played with before, which is really exciting to like play the music with musicians I don't even know
Yeah,
like how they play or their styles or anything. So it's that's really cool. So nice thing about that is like, oh, we can like play in more cities than just Winnipeg, right? Like Winnipeg and Vancouver. And then, like I don't have any like I don't have any obviously any tours lined up or anything like that because I'm just trying to get myself known and get myself out there. And I met with someone on Zoom just talking about my album and what next. And he said like, "What are your goals for the album?" I said, "Well, I'd love to go on tour."
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, that's a great idea, but unfortunately, the only like people that know you are in Winnipeg. Like, if you traveled Western Canada, like you'd probably lose money because just people don't know who you are, right?" So it's like right now we're just trying to spread our music, um, not just across Canada, but actually around the world. There's this great website called Groover where you basically it's a platform for sending music to various Spotify playlists around the world. And so it costs about I think $2 or $3 a playlist to send it to the playlist, and
Okay.
then they have a week to listen to it and give you feedback. If they don't listen to it, you get your money back. If they do listen to it, they'll either tell you, "Hey, nice song," or "This needs work, but it's not for our playlist," or "Hey, we love this, we're going to add it." So it's been literally put on playlists around the world. Last week it was put on the playlist in Romania, which
Well,
is just wild. And obviously, like I don't have any expectations of all of a sudden getting a phone call from Romania. "Hey, we want you to play it," but it's just a way of getting the music out there. And I think that with the music, I want it to be, like when I met with Larry Roy about recording and producing this record, I said I don't want to just make an album to make an album. Like I want to make a great album because this album is going to be out there forever. So I want to do a good job, and I want it to be heard by as many people as possible. So
of course, yeah, yeah.
that was kind of the goal with that.
So maybe that's a good segue into how can people hear your music? I mean, if someone's hearing about you for the first time on the show and they want to look into what you're up to as far as potential future shows or where they can hear the record, what's the best way to find you online?
Yeah, so obviously you can stream my music through any streaming platform like Spotify, Apple Music, also YouTube. And then also probably the best way is through my website, which is www.cdmusic.ca. And through there you can not only see where I'm playing and see and hear the music, but also there's also like links on the website that share the stories behind every song on the album, like
Yeah, I saw that. That's
you know
very cool. Yeah.
yeah, like how I created the song, and also Cordelia's side of like her lyrics. Just because I think people enjoy the stories behind the music. Like I really find it interesting when like like for a story that just came to mind is the Bonnie Raitt song "I Can't Make You Love Me." I heard a story, then I actually met the producer of that record and
Okay.
asked him if it was, and I asked him if it was true. He says, "Oh yeah, it's very true." And he's what the story is that Bonnie Raitt was so emotional in the studio recording that song that she kept crying, and they had to do take after take after take because it was just such a personal. Even though she didn't write it, it was just so personal to her because it's like, I can't make you love me if you don't, and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that's such a deep message. So it's just really I think it's cool hearing the stories. So I thought, well, might as well just put them on my website so people can find out.
Yeah,
um
definitely, definitely.
yeah.
And you also have physical copies available too, right? I have to ask about that because I'm old and set in my ways, and I haven't ventured into streaming yet. All my records are physical CDs, tapes, vinyl, everything.
Yeah,
But you have CDs out, right?
I definitely do. Yeah, so I printed 500, and I still have about 350 left in my basement. So um if anyone wants a physical copy of the album, they're $10 each, and you can just email me through my website, www.cdmusic.ca, and then you can yeah, help me out. And because also that's kind of I think supporting local artists is really important. And also, streaming platforms, the pay is just so crap
Yeah,
that
it's
it
dismal.
just,
Yeah, it's bad.
yeah, it just doesn't like last month, I think I had over 8,000 streams and I made like $7 or something, so it's just like, yeah, so I really, appreciate the support, but even if people decide to stream my music, I'm very happy with that as well.
Awesome.